Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video I'm going to give you a full rundown and a full guide on everything you need to know about logbooks and all of the different ways to use them. So without further ado, let's get into it, and there's a lot to cover. So here you can see a logbook on the trade website. There's definitely a ton of different types of these, and we're going to break down how it all works and what everything means. So the first thing you want to notice is the item level. This is actually relevant for logbooks. Doing lower level logbooks will give you a less chance to spawn bosses and also less chance to spawn higher remnants. So higher remnants are special types of remnants, which we'll get into in just a minute here, but you basically want to be doing logbooks which are level 68 or higher for the best chance at getting some of the more powerful remnants and a higher chance at getting the bosses, which is where a lot of the gains come from, and that's basically going to be really, really good for you. Alright, so that's item level covered. The next thing you're going to notice here are the three different kind of options we have here. Logbooks have anywhere between 2 to 3 different locations that you can select based on the logbook. So you can see here, this one has Shipwreck Reef, Bluffs, and Desert Ruins, and you can see there's a number of modifiers here as well as a faction associated with each of these areas. And as you can see, there's a ton of different areas and a ton of different factions that you can observe, as well as a myriad of other mods which will affect your logbook action. So let's quickly start out with the factions. So there are 4 different factions that you can see on each of the different logbook areas, and each of these will award the different currency types of the different members of Expedition. So for example, Grand Broken Circle is, I think, the Druids, the Black Scythe is the Black Scythe, Grand Order is Grand Order, and then Grand Sun is Grand Sun, of course. So those are the 4 different factions, and they correspond to each of the different factions listed on logbooks. So if you see one here, Order of the Chalice, the Cups. Okay, this guy's the Cups here, so the Order of the Chalice here is the Cups. And then you can see Druids of the Broken Circle here, this is the Broken Circle. So when you're in there and you're breaking open chests and you're doing the encounters, all of those currencies that drop will be the exact currencies that were listed on the area that you got. So if you're doing Order of the Chalice, you're only going to get Chalice artifacts. And in addition to that, if you're doing Chalice, you're going to get the Chalice-based reroll tokens, which are for Rogue. So if you want to do a specific member, you want to go with making sure that you pick the specific location that aligns with them. And we're going to talk a little bit about this later, but this is actually a pretty important one, but it is a determining factor in deciding where you want to go. So the other super duper important one here is the location. So the location is actually going to dictate the tile set, but also the opportunities that you have of using special remnants within the logbooks, which we'll talk about a little bit in a second here. But yeah, the locations are incredibly relevant, and there is actually quite a lot of locations. And if I had to compare the locations to something, they're essentially a little bit like the different types of heists that you can do. So you know how there's like lockpicking, there's deception and stuff like that. That's the kind of thing that the locations are, and you can compare them directly to that, and that's what we're going to be getting into now. All right, so let's pull up the spreadsheet here. Of course, we have the spreadsheet. Here is the spreadsheet here. So we'll pull it up. So here are all the different areas that you can encounter. There's Bluffs, Shipwreck Reef, Sun Slums, and each of these are going to have 2 different special remnant modifiers that you can blow up to gain additional effects on your explosion chains. These remnants will look significantly different and will actually glow a different color to traditional remnants. However, they will share a similar icon on the minimap, so you will indeed have to scout the entire map to figure out where these special remnants are and then blow them up accordingly, which can take quite a bit of time, but in some cases can be very, very worth it. So let's get into it. So what are the different remnants and where should you be targeting to go? So a lot of the remnants, the special remnants that being, aren't too powerful, unfortunately. Stuff like enchanted items and Legion Splinters, while it sounds cool, you get a 20% chance at having either runic monsters or chests to contain a stack of splinters, or in this case, an enchanted item, and overall, it doesn't actually end up to be that powerful. Now, where it does end up being powerful is if instead of an enchanted item, that's a scarab, or a stack of simulacrum splinters. That does eventually start being a lot more interesting. So all areas are not created equal, and it's very, very important to reference a cheat sheet or an Excel or something like that to understand what you're getting into and what you can like have available to you in a certain area. So by far the best area is undoubtedly a shipwreck reef here. That drops scarabs and breach splinters. And on average, I'd expect if you blew up a perfect chain in a high item level map, then you're probably going to get anywhere between 15 to 20 scarabs if you prioritize getting scarab remnants, and you also get a good amount of them in your map. So overall, that is quite rewarding, and it is going to be pretty good. Now, you also do have other ones like fossils, which can be quite good. It has been confirmed that these can drop hollow fossils and fractured fossils and the likes of those. I don't know how common they are yet, but people have reported that that does drop. So obviously take that with a grain of salt. It's not coming from me, it's coming from my community, but it does seem pretty promising. Currency shards are also pretty good overall, and they will give you some shards, potentially like Harbinger shards, Exalt shards, etc. It's essentially the Harbinger type reward, and it is pretty strong. So definitely not too bad there. So yeah, the standout one is definitely Shipwreck Reef, with Volcanic Island as well as Karoo Wargraves being okay. And that's pretty much where it stops in terms of the Omega rewarding ones. But the Cemetery here is also not too bad. But those are the ones that you really want to be going for. The rest of the remnants are kind of underwhelming. And for the most part, you'd probably ignore them in the maps that you get, which is a little bit of a shame, but you know, it is what it is. All right, not too bad there. Okay, so that's what the impact of location and the impact of the faction has. Let's go on to the big one now. Let's talk a little bit about the bosses. So the bosses, there is 4 of which can spawn. Let's talk about how you can track these down, how they spawn, and how you're going to get involved with them, and what kind of loot you can expect from them. So the first one here is how you track them down. So bosses are essentially randomly generated in the logbooks, and you'll notice that you have a boss when you see this skull icon on the minimap as a reward type. When you blow up that skull type, it's either going to spawn the boss in straight on the spot for some of them, or it's going to create a hole that you can go down into a boss arena in the case of some of the other ones. So I've fought 3 of the 4 bosses right now. There's one for each corresponding faction, and each of the different bosses have different mechanics and are actually really, really well designed and really, really fun to fight. Now, these bosses aren't too rare. I did about 20 logbooks and I encountered 5. So overall, there's a reasonable good amount of chance that you're going to get one. And the logbooks I were running were around level 68 to 69. So you definitely have a very good chance of encountering these. So in terms of it, you do encounter them randomly, but there is a modifier that you can roll as an implicit on the logbook itself, which says that the boss is present there, so you will be able to engage with the mechanic deterministically if you would like to do so. So very, very good there. So in terms of the bosses, as I mentioned, there's one for each faction. Depending on the location you pick faction assignment, it will have that boss in there. So for example, if you pick the Black Scythe one, and then you get in the arena and you're in like any random location, it will always be the Black Scythe boss that you'll be fighting, and it'll have the Black Scythe rewards along with it. Which is pretty good. Alright, so let's talk about what you can expect to get. So from these bosses here, you can expect to get quite a little bit of currency in the form of a stack of each of the different currency types. So, you know, lesser, common, greater, and grand. It's going to give you a stack of each of them, which is fairly good. A lot of those are worth a lot of money, which we'll get into a little bit later. But also, it's going to give you a ton of the reroll currency for that specific faction type. So, let's say you got Black Scythe, it'll give you a ton of exotic coinage, which is really, really good. This does seem to scale with the remnants on the map, as well as map quantity, and I think it also scales with map tier, as at one point in a high tier one, I got like 22 Astrogales, which are the dice from the boss. That's a lot of Astrogales. So yeah, definitely pretty good, and the bosses are actually quite rewarding. If you target the correct factions, you can, you know, net 50 or 60 C from them if you do it in high tier maps with correct remnants in terms of the currency that you're going to be getting just from slaying the boss, which is super duper awesome. Now, these bosses also do drop the new ward bases. You know, take it or leave it. If you're interested in those, you can also get them from them. It's pretty much guaranteed that they're going to drop a ward base. From my testing, they've always dropped one, as well as the rewards I just spoke about. In addition to that, there are some uniques that drop from the new bosses, some of which I've been told are incredibly powerful, specifically the Flask. However, I haven't seen any uniques yet drop from any of the bosses, and I think I've done about 7 or 8 now in total. So they're definitely a little bit on the rare side in terms of the uniques. I'd probably rank them probably about 10% or lower drop rate based on my anecdotal evidence and the evidence of my community, or lower. So yeah, quite rare in terms of the uniques. Let's talk about the next thing that you can be expecting in your expedition logbooks, which is a little bit different to the overall expedition experience. So you're going to be able to get these hidden areas in your logbooks, and they look exactly like this here. You can see this little cave thing, and these are going to be essentially side areas that you can investigate and you can take a look at, and when you go in them and down them, there's going to be additional chests, rewards, and runic monsters to slay. Now, these chests do actually yield pretty much a lot of loot. They're kind of what you would expect. You know, there's essence chests, there's currency chests, there's fossil chests, etc. Basically the same chests that you can see above the logbook area, which we're talking about in a second here. But they're pretty rewarding. They have anywhere between 2 all the way up to like 4 or 5 chests in them, depending on which kind of underground area you get. So they are definitely worth pursuing, and they do actually inherit all of the logbook remnant modifiers. So let's say that you stacked up like tons of remnant modifiers, which say that you get stacked decks when opening chests. Well, those chests down the hidey hole are also going to drop stacked decks. So it's actually a pretty damn good idea to make it so that your explosion chain sort of lines up, that it goes through all the remnants and then it ends on a boss or on the hideouts. That's basically the best way to do it, and that's going to give you the most rewards and bang for your buck, as they are essentially clusters of chests and runic monsters, and the best way to kind of get that big end boom of loot, which is definitely very, very good there. You can see me placing explosives in the background here. So overall, those are the 2 unique mechanics to the expedition logbooks: the bosses, the hidey holes, and the remnants. So that's 3 unique mechanics. But you can also see here that instead of the traditional chests that you find in maps, you find league-specific rewarded chests. So I'll just rewind here so you guys can see it a little bit more. There's basically chests for most of the league mechanics in the game. There's heist, there's ritual, there's, you know, pretty much everything is present. And they actually are reasonably generous with their rewards. So much so that it's almost a better strategy to just go for chests over remnants a lot of the time, as they do yield quite a lot of loot. You'll be getting stacks of like multiple currency, like 3 or 4 chaos in some cases. People have talked about getting 3 exalts from the chests and stuff like that. You can get, like, you know, quite a few fossils. I think I mentioned it earlier. You can get the hollow fossils and stuff like that, which are quite good. And, you know, overall, the chests do feel reasonably good. I wish there was a few more of them and they were kind of a little bit more tightly packed, but, you know, overall, they're not too bad. But I would actually probably recommend prioritizing the league-specific expedition currency chests, as some of those currencies are worth quite a pretty penny right now, and they are very, very good. But you want to be able to get all of those you can, and they're going to be super duper strong. So that's pretty much everything that's unique about logbooks. Let's talk a little bit about the metagaming around it, and then also we'll talk a little bit about what we can hope to see in the future. Alright, so of course we talked a little bit about areas. Let's talk about the currencies themselves, and that's really going to be driving a lot of your decisions when it comes to picking logbooks. So of course, let's bring up the spreadsheet again here. Let's jump in. So overall, your first decision when you're assessing a logbook of where you want to go is going to be the areas. If you have Shipwreck Reef, for example, then you're going to want to take that because it's got the opportunity to get scarabs in it, and those are going to be quite lucrative. Literally, 1 good scarab could pay off the entire cost of the logbook, and then all of the rest are pretty much free. So if you have, for example, Shipwreck Reef, you should be checking out for that first. You know, if you have like Karui Wargraves, you know, that could also be something that you want to investigate looking into. However, that's a little bit neither here nor there. Shipwreck Reef really is the main one. If you have that, you're definitely going to be good to go. Now, when assessing the different factions, you're going to want to take a look at the current prices of each of the different currencies. So Black Scythe corresponds to Tujen, the Haggler. Order of the Chalice corresponds to Rog the Crafter. Knight of the Sun corresponds to the Deneg, the Exchanger. And Druids of the Broken Circle unfortunately corresponds to Gwyneth, the Gambler. So overall, it's pretty much a surefire never pick for Druids of the Broken Circle. Gwyneth is pretty underwhelming, and overall she is not very in demand at all. No one really wants any of her currency, and most people think she's a waste of time. I don't blame them. I also think that. So overall, avoid Druids of the Broken Circle. Take that away over there. That's basically the stone circles of this league. She's definitely pretty underwhelming. So overall, unless it's like Shipwreck Reef and Druids of the Broken Circle, you don't want to be picking that. You're going to basically hamstring yourself, and it's going to be much harder to get really good loot out of your logbook. Now, the 2 best ones though, Black Scythe and Knights of the Sun. So Knights of the Sun is pretty cool. It's the Neg's currency. His currency can essentially be logbooks, it can be rerolls, and it can be anyone else's currency all at the same time. So he is by far the most valuable currency, and he is going to also have the most valuable boss. And I've been told his boss also drops a flask, which is worth, 5 or 6 exalts, I think, at the time of this video. And I imagine that's probably in the neighborhood of the chase item of this league. So Knights of the Sun is probably a pretty surefire bet. His currency is the best. And overall, he's going to be the most value for opening up the expedition chests. And he's definitely going to be the easiest to make your money back overall on. His rerolls are worth a lot. His currencies are worth a lot. He's a winner. All right, the next one here is Black Scythe. So this guy is pretty good as well. This is the Haggler. Tujen, he's the easiest to convert into raw value. So if you actually just sit there, your average player can actually turn, exotic coins and the currency into raw currency that they can then put on their build. This is a really good thing. And Tujen overall is going to be the most friendly to the most amount of players, and he is very highly valued as a result. You can pull exalts out of him. You can pull tons of currency out of him. He's really, really good. And overall, Knights of the Sun and Black Scythe should be prioritized over everything unless you get a really, really good area. They should basically be auto pick, with Knights of the Sun taking a little bit of precedent over Black Scythe, in my opinion. Knights of the Sun is better. And then, if you don't get Knights of the Sun, you don't get Black Scythe, and you don't get a really good area, then you can look into taking, for example, Order of the Chalice. It's a little bit less in demand, but you can see here that his grand currency is still worth 1 to 5 right now, which is pretty good. You generally get a stack of 15, and then from like a chest, and sometimes if you kill a boss, you get like a stack of 40, which is pretty damn good, and that's like 8C right there. And then obviously you get a ton of scrap metal, which is the reroll currency, which you can then use, and that's like 15 stay there if you get 10 of those. So, it can work out to be okay for you if you pick Order of the Chalice, but you'd much rather pick the other ones because they're just way more value. So overall, the assessment is going to go like this. You're going to go, do I have any good areas? No. Okay. All right. Do I have Knights of the Sun or Black Scythe? No. Okay. Well, I'll probably go with Order of the Chalice because it's pretty unlikely that you don't get either of those 3. And then if you get broken through into the broken circle, I'd probably sell it. I'll be honest with you. It's going to be pretty hard to make your money back on that one, but it is what it is. All right, so that's kind of the assessment process there. Let's talk a little bit about the last dimension here that you're going to want to consider, which is rolling your logbooks. So there's a number of modifiers on logbooks which are pretty damn good. Some of them are going to increase the amount of explosive charges that you have by an amount. I think it's around 40%, which is pretty good. On the lower end, you have around 18 explosive charges in lower tier maps, and then I think it goes up to 20 in T16s. And then if you increase that by 40%, that's pretty damn good. So that goes up to around 26, 27, 28, around that area. And this is actually an incredibly powerful mechanic because the more remnants you can domino, the more and more value you get at the end explosions. So those end explosions could be like worth 4 or 5 times as much as the first explosion you do. So the more explosions you get on the end, the better. And the more efficient you are with placing the explosions, the better it is as well. So overall, it's a massive more multiplier on the loot, and it's going to allow you to get a ton more loot overall. So the explosions are really, really great. In addition to that, you also want to look out for explosion range. So the radius that the explosions cover, so you can kind of get more bang for your buck that way. And the other one is also the explosion distance. The distance in which you can place explosions away. That's also really, really good. It allows you to cherry pick different kind of areas on the map as you want. And it's actually incredibly good as it reduces the amount of travel explosions you need to do in the map itself. And overall, it's going to be super good. I might have to upload a logbook and me breaking down what I'm thinking and doing. I think that'd be a pretty popular video as well, and really, really useful for you guys. So I might do that in the future as well. But overall, you want to look for those modifiers mainly. It can be okay if you go for some of the things, like stuff like 6% chance to contain twice as many items is pretty weak. But 40% increased number of runic monsters is really, really good. That's basically 40% more runic monsters, which is really, really strong. And overall, that's going to be nice. But overall, you want to scale your explosions primarily, as there's never enough explosions or enough range to actually cover the full area anyway. So you want to go for those first, as they afford the most flexibility, if you can. And then, if you have to settle for the others, it's okay as well. So not bad there. That's pretty much going to be the main breakdown of logbooks for you guys here. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video. I do want to point out here that it is definitely worth rolling your logbooks for additional quantity, as it's going to increase the amount of expedition currencies that drop, as well as the amount of expedition reroll currencies that drop, which in some cases are worth a lot, especially if you get a lot of them from your encounter, and that's going to be really, really strong. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and it gives you guys a bit of insight into how the logbooks work. One final tip I'll give you guys though is, let me just open up the Twitch chat here. You can see, we can't see it very well here. Let me just scroll through for you guys at the end here. It'll be a hot tip. After I detonate the explosive here, you will be able to see this tiny little icon here. I don't know if you guys can see that on the video, but if you hover over that, you are able to see all of the modifiers that are currently in play by explosive placed. And you can check that for any immunities that might hit you. For example, my build isn't so great with cold damage immunity, so I have to check to make sure there's no cold immunity. You can hover over that icon, make sure you haven't messed up your explosion chain, and you can also double check the rewards and other modifiers on there as well. So with all that said, guys, hope you guys have enjoyed the video, and hopefully you guys are enjoying Expedition. I find it really, really fun. Rewards might need a bit of tuning, but with all that said, hope you guys enjoyed. See you guys in the next one. Cheers.